Alright, let's go right into it. We're going to finish 26 through 34, and then I'll be done with this lecture. So we're back to here where we left off, the rise of Hitler. So the Nazis are also known as the National Socialist Party, or what they began as the German Workers' Party. Not founded by Hitler, but eventually by 1924, headed by Hitler. They held little power or appeal to most until the Depression hit, meaning their popularity came about with the Depression when people start to look for different leadership. This is what the party called for: four things. 1. The repudiation, meaning get rid of the Versailles Treaty. Unification with Austria. Let's take back some of the lands we lost in World War I with Austria. German nationalism. Germany is great. Praise the nation. Exclusion of the Jews from German citizenship. Let's get rid of the Jews, the pestilence that has caused so many problems, according to Hitler and the Nazis throughout the years. So that's their four main ideas, which people, some of them rally around, but eventually they might not necessarily agree with all of them, such as number 4, but they start to go along with it because the Nazis, once they rise to power, they help the economy improve. We'll get to that. Hitler always showed special concern for small enterprise, meaning the little man, small business. Small business was pushed out by big business and the proletariat, the working class, and he was able to appeal to them. Also to the young. Young people liked Hitler. 40% of the Nazi Party was under 30 years old in 1931. He formed the Hitler Youth, which was a big part of it, years earlier in 1926. So young people were learning the ways of the Nazis. If your parents were Nazis, part of the Nazi Party, most likely you were a member of the Nazi Youth. And Hitler's major support came from the lower middle class, farmers and young people. I talked about the Hitler Youth. You need to be a member of the Nazi Party and between the ages of 10 and 18. In 1926, Hitler and the Nazi Party establishes their youth programs. By 1934, membership has reached 3.5 million members within Germany. And by 1939, the start of World War II, membership's up to 9 million people. 9 million kids from ages 10 to 18, and a special chapter is created just for girls. The purpose? Educate young children in the ways of the Nazis and create loyalty. Good, young, German, Aryan citizens. That's what they wanted. Economics. Let's talk a little bit about why Hitler was so popular. 1929, the crash, fear all over Germany. And what Hitler does is he promises good tidings, good things, economic as well as political salvation. He's going to save the people. And his promises work. I mean, he uses fear tactics and propaganda, but more than anything, once he came to power, people got jobs. They really did. So unemployment, which stood at 6 million, more than the rest of Europe combined, which was 43%, almost half of the German labor force, was unemployed by 1929. And we'll look at how Hitler changed that. But the bottom line, Hitler did provide jobs. He put Germany back to work, and people liked that a lot. So Hitler comes to full power in 1933. President Hindenburg, who we talked about, he appointed him as chancellor. So he comes to power legally, democratic vote. He was popular. Then once he has power, like Mussolini, like other fascist regimes, he uses violence and intimidation to consolidate, to bring all power to himself. This meant that he did it legally, but once he had power, things changed. So he did this in good conscience, and that's important to remember. So the Nazi Party marching through the streets in 1933, and shortly after this, the famous Reichstag fire takes place. So the Reichstag fire is most likely a staged event by Hitler and the Nazi Party. What he did was he blamed the fire in the Reichstag building. I think I have a picture of it here. I have a picture of it here. But then when I visited Germany, I thought I had a picture of it. Bummer. Maybe it's later in the slides. Anyways, it's a fire in their government building, and they suspect that Hitler staged it himself in order to blame the communists. He needed to get rid of the communists because they were a huge political rival, and he was able to use this as a big propaganda move. So, blame the communists. I don't know if that's true. That's interesting. Hitler actually hired a Dutch communist to set the fire. Whether that's true or not, that's debatable, but nonetheless, the fire happened. Hitler blames the communists, and he's able to put a whole bunch of propaganda out there against the communists, so the popular opinion turns against the communists, and they lose authority. Next, Hitler looks inward. He completely controls the government, and now he's taking violent measures to make sure he he keeps power, remains in power. This is called the Night of Long Knives in 1934, where he murdered his competition within his own party, within the Nazi party, including a man named Ernst Röhm, the head of the SA, the secret police. He had his own men put to death. So on this night, over 100 secret police soldiers were killed, and Himmler's made head of the SS, or the stormtroopers. Here's a funny political cartoon. It says, "They salute with both hands now," as Hitler threatens anybody who comes against him. So we talked about how he helped the economy, but here are some of the stats. Unemployment, which was at 6 million, by 1936, it's at 1 million. Remarkable. By the end of that year, there's actually a shortage of German workers. His program was very similar to Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. It was a public works program, meaning they put the government in charge of the economy, and they provided jobs by creating works programs where they might be working all over the country on different construction projects or something else like that. But the bottom line was, it put people back to work, so Hitler becomes even more popular. Like I said, much more popular. And even with his harsh, racist rhetoric, people still supported him out of loyalty because of what he did for the German popularity, or the German people. So, Fascist Italy, major influence on Hitler, we talked about that. Major difference. Italy was a fascist state that had to work with other powerful groups. Catholic Church, Nazis, they didn't have to work with anybody. They were one party, totalitarian, all-powerful state, coordination of all society under their power and ideologies. I'm going to pause right there. So you read about how Mussolini's tactics to consolidate, to keep all power, and they're very similar to Hitler's tactics. Book burning, something that was very common, to get rid of the literature that opposed your party. So Hitler, any ideas that opposed him, he got rid of them. And these book burning sessions were common in Germany at this time. It's right out in front of this university here is where the actual scene takes place. And there's this great scene in The Book Thief, which we're going to watch a part of here. Oh, it's all good. So here's a scene from the Book Thief, which illustrates one of those book burning sessions. So they're burning the literature of Jewish authors, popular American Western authors, capitalist type mentality. They get rid of those authors. So let's take a look. Maybe. There we go.
Deshalb haben wir uns heute wieder zur mitternächtlichen Stunde hier versammelt, um uns von jeglichem intellektuellen Unrat zu befreien. Wir werden die Krankheit, die Deutschland seit 20 Jahren befallen hat, ausmerzen. Wir werden die Ketten, die geschmiedet wurden, um uns zu knechten, endgültig zerstören. Wir werden unsere Feinde bekämpfen.
So a very powerful scene. And if you haven't seen The Book Thief, you have to. It's a great movie. It's an even better book. And you can watch the whole thing online here. But the point being, Hitler and the Nazis, they controlled every aspect of society. And information was so powerful, and they knew it. So to get rid of ideas and to incept their ideologies was what they were doing. And that was what they did so powerfully. One of their other ideologies, which they promoted heavily through now legal means after 1935, was the anti-Semitism that they promoted. So the Nuremberg laws, we looked at those last year when we did our Nazi unit. They robbed Jews of German citizenship and closed their jobs down, their professions, as well as prevented them from marrying Germans from marrying Jews, basically, and vice versa. Kristallnacht, shortly after that, 1938, Night of Broken Glass. It's outright violence against the Jews. It's no longer legal, institutionalized segregation. It's outright violence against the Jews. And it's not, shortly after that, it's not a far stretch from that to the deportation of Jews, which began in 1941 when the 6 killing camps were started, all of them in Poland. Before that, many Jews had immigrated. They tried to get out of the country. Many could, many couldn't. By 1938, 1.3 million German Jews had left, most to neighboring countries, where unfortunately many were later deported by the Nazis after these countries were occupied by Germany. Propaganda games, we looked at these last year. This is a great effort by the Germans to trick the world and to buy time for Hitler and the Nazi regime to gain power, and it worked. We studied that last year. Hitler's goal was to show the superiority of the Aryan race and to show the resurgence of Nazi Germany and how great they are for leading Germany out of the Great Depression. And it works. The world was impressed. They believed the show, the facade. Hitler continued to grow in popularity, and this is something very common that you would see in Nazi Germany. A poster like this at the time of this Aryan man who represents the glorious history of Germany and this nationalistic idea the Nazis promoted, which is why they became known as the propaganda games. Ethnic cleansing begins shortly after this. Jews were not the only targets of Hitler. Sadly, an ethnic group called the Gypsies, or the Romneys, I don't think that's right, spelled right, I'm sorry. Gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, people of color and mixed race. I mean, it's not just Jews who are targeted. Anyone seen as inferior or less than Slavs, gays and lesbians, also not included on here. People with any sort of disability were considered inferior. They were targeted as well. So the sad reality of Hitler's Nazi regime was they targeted anybody who was non-Aryan, who they saw as less than them. Where did Hitler get his ideas? That's what we're going to get into in our last lecture before spring break. So we have covered now, going back to your worksheet here, 26 through 34, all of part 2, part 3. You finished most of part 1, I hope, on Italy, and if you haven't finished part 2, find the part in chapter 27. Oh, I gotta change the lesson objective here. Reading objective. No, I don't. That's right. So find the section on the rise of the Nazis in chapter 27, and do the same thing you did with fascist Italy, but for this section for Nazi Germany. That is all. Let me tell you a little bit where we headed leading up to spring break. You're going to have one final test the Wednesday, which will cover all of this material. So you're studying for that test as you go through and complete this stuff. Make sure you do a good job. Yes, you will have some homework over spring break, but I know I gave you a lot of homework this weekend with this stuff, so I'll cut you a little slack over spring break. I'm not going to say I'm going to cut you a bunch of slack, but I definitely will take into consideration I gave you a lot of homework this weekend, and I appreciate you doing a good job on it. This will pay off on your test, and keep up the good work. Ciao. Watch a lot of basketball. Yes, yes, yes.